one of the things I've noticed most in all of these years guiding people to find and live their purpose is that it rarely, if ever, comes easily. It typically brings us face to face with our greatest fears and has us travel into our deepest wounds. And that's certainly been the case with my guest in this week's show, Kate Motley. Kate shares her journey of going from being absolutely gripped by people pleasing. It felt impossible for her to speak her truth. And yet today she is leading women's circles and holding the space for women to speak their authentic truth. The journey that Kate has been on, which is one that I've witnessed firsthand because a lot of it has taken place in our various crucibles and programs over the years. It's one that is so relatable, so moving, and so inspiring. Wherever you are on that journey of discovering what your soul came here for, my sense is you'll find something in Kate's experience that really speaks to your soul. Let's dive in. Hello, Kate. A huge, warm welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Leanne. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
Oh, it really is my absolute pleasure and honor. And as we were talking about just before we began recording, there is something very kind of metaphorical in its own right, us being here, having this conversation, in that even you being here on the show is such a so symbolic of your journey, of your story and where you are, which listeners are going to hear why that's so symbolic as we unfold. But I just want to name there is something, those times in life where we really get to see, here I am living my myth. And for me, this is that for you right now. And so I feel just honored to be part of the unfolding of that too.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely
So,
feels like that.
oh, this is going to be, just one of those like delightful opportunities for me personally. So Laszlo's so excited he's joined in, rolling on the floor as well. So we were just talking about how, as anyone that will know if they've joined us for a crucible like a medicine, much of the way that we work is through the lens of myth and story, and particularly in the context of us becoming our medicine, it really is about understanding what's that story that we've come here to live, what's that myth, and we do it through this lens of uncovering our old story and then that new story that we're being called into. And so, given this is all about your story, I think that would just be such a lovely synopsis of your story to begin with, that juxtaposition of, for you, Kate, what do you know of that old story, new story?
Yeah, it's I am the complete opposite, or I am living out the complete opposite of my experience up until probably even in the last year. And the understanding of my old story, I didn't realize how important it was at the time, but the more time goes on, the more I realize how crucial that is, in order to be able to bring ourselves the love that we need to bring ourselves when we do start taking those steps to show up. And so for me, I remember once my partner said to me in very early days of our relationship, he actually said to me, I feel like you've just been sort of uncovered from underneath a rock. Like you're just so, I can't even remember how he described me, but it was like I was this kind of newborn being or something. Like I'd been hidden away. And I now, like years later, having been on this journey with you guys and having dived so deep in my upbringing and my old story, it was absolutely true. I had been hidden under a rock, and I had my whole experience growing up, and it becomes more and more clear the more you layer upon layer, the longer you're in the work, it becomes more apparent how I had been taught that I was to keep myself small, keep myself quiet, not show up, not just please other people at all costs. That was what I was taught to do. To express yourself, even experiences of showing up as in a sort of feminine way was all to be shamed and shut away. Life growing up was about pleasing other people, 100% all the time. And because you growing up in that, you don't realise that's all you've ever known. And yeah, it's interesting, even starting on the journey of learning your old story or understanding your old story. It takes, well, for me anyway, it took a long time of real repeated exploration. And then as you start to show up, you then see, oh my God, like I was absolutely just shut away. The idea of showing up felt so shameful, just to exist. Um, so yeah, it's taken a long time to find the courage to step out, even in the smallest of ways. It's been such a gradual process, and I've had such resistance to it. Um, yeah, yeah. So that was my whole life growing up. I'd look to other people for guidance of how to be. I'd have my mum at home. I'd have whoever my friend was at school. In secondary school, I had a friend, and I looked to her to how to be. I was totally dependent on her. Um, I looked to other people constantly. I think I had a permanent internal narrative saying to myself, okay, so just like size up what's going on here and see if you can fit into that. I think it was a constant narrative the whole time. Um, and then, of course, in my relationships, my intimate relationships, I have been completely outsourced my power to that person because I had no, and I didn't even know I was doing it. I knew I wasn't happy, but I
Mm,
didn't even know I was doing it because that's all I'd ever
yes.
known. Mm,
Yeah. There's so many things here that you've said that I just think are such archetypal parts of this journey of uncovering that old story that we think, first of all, we think we already know who we
mm,
are. We know where we've
mm,
come from,
mm,
but no, we really don't know until we start to consciously go there. And then, as you were saying, we get to spiral deeper and deeper. So there's that kind of first pass of a sense of what that old story is. And then when we're ready, we get to spiral deeper and see more and reclaim more. And
mm.
the way you've described how that's happened for you is something I just see over and over. Every time we think we're done, we get to have another pass at it and see more. The other thing that I think is really important to recognize in your story is that for some, and you'll know because you've journeyed through crucibles like medicine with other people, some people have much more of a kind of like big traumatic events that are the main points that make up their old story, and perhaps easier, at least on the face of it, to see that, oh, that happened to me, therefore no wonder I'm the way I am.
Mm,
And there might be one or two significant events like this, and even when that's the case, they ultimately are like kind of, you could say, like punctuations in an underlying energetic, but it's easier to kind of access what that energetic
mhm,
is because they're captured in those events. For some, like yourself, it's less about these really obvious events, and it's more just the water you're swimming in.
mhm,
And that can provide a challenge, a different kind of challenge. One, I know that you'll completely resonate with this. There's this sense of, well, who am I to complain? I didn't have it's too bad. I didn't have this horrendous thing happen to me that I can see this person over here experience. I didn't have this, awful, like I had a, fairly normal upbringing that everyone says that, that's the upbringing we all want. Um, why am I the way I am? I don't get to complain when I, didn't have it too bad at all. So I think that there's that I think is really helpful to acknowledge. Like, this isn't meant to be at all a competition of like who had it worse or I had this kind of trauma. It really does not matter. It really does not matter the form our story took or how it unfolded or those particular things that brought us into a place of fear, shame, and pain. What matters is we get to be intimate with it, we get to know the story. And so anything that's in the way of that, like, oh, I didn't have it too bad, there's nothing to see here, is something that's going to get in the way. So I think naming that's really helpful because it allows us to move past and through that. But again, that when you said at the end, it's like you knew you're unhappy, but you didn't know why you're unhappy. This again goes right to the heart of why we work the way we do, because that's true for so many of us. We're out in this modern world living these lives that doing our best to fit in and be successful in this modern culture's terms, and we know that we're not satisfied, or we know that we're unhappy, or we know that we're, whatever the thing is, anxious, in pain, stressed, but we don't truly know why, because the answer lies back in that past, in that old story, in the wound, which everyone everywhere is encouraging us to go anywhere but there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so your story is just like such a perfect, like, archetypal arc of all of that and why it happens the way it does and why we don't go there. So skipping like into a little bit of your new story, and then I think we'll kind of like go back and start to like join the dots between the two. What have you discovered about your news story? And so I just to provide a little bit more context of this. So the news story again is something that in the work we do, we help people uncover like what is it we're being called into. If we alchemize those wounds into gold, what do they look like in terms of that myth that we're being called to live? And its roots will often be in our old story. This isn't a kind of just complete, let's forget everything that went before. This is very much a true alchemy of what went before. So what do you know of that new story for you, Kate?
Yeah, and this has really been illuminated so much more clearly to me recently since I've started to actually show up a little more. And yeah, I can feel it working every time I do it. And that is to speak my truth. But the bit that was really difficult, and I think it's knowing what it's knowing what the truth is to be able to speak it out in the first place. That's the difficult bit, because when you've just experienced your entire life abandoning your truth, to identify it is like, so in everyday interactions with my intimate partner, for example, or with friends, or in showing up, in offering my medicine in whatever way, so often something feels just not stuck. Something feels stuck, and I can feel myself, feeling stuck. Like there's something not right, and I've now begun to learn and discern that means that there's something I'm not revealing. There's something that I'm not speaking out, and so I'm able. I can drop in and ask myself what's going on here, and having been on this journey for so long, I now feel I can do it quite quickly. And so I think sometimes we can my medicine is about just showing up authentically, exactly as I am in any given moment, and I can notice myself when I do it. I feel a kind of a surge of liberation in any time that I actually do that, and how, oh my God, yes, that's what it was, and that's what's so needed in this moment. Like, I know when I've been running circles as well, and I can feel when something flows out of me where I'm deeply honest about my challenges in, you know, in all the practices that we try and, or I try and have tried to step into, and again, I've had massive resistance to, that I have, you know, I do have resistance to them, as so much less now, and in fact, I'm getting some enjoyment out of it. But I can share that in circle. I remember sharing that in circle one day, and it just felt so right. I didn't know that's what I was going to do, and the impact that had on the women was huge. They were all kind of like, "Oh my God, it's so nice that you're really honest about that," you know. And to me, it wouldn't make any sense not to be. But so, I don't know that I'm withholding something. I just know that when something's just feeling sticky, then there's something that needs to be revealed. And yeah, every time it feels like medicine to myself first and foremost, to be honest. And then it
Yes.
clearly seems to be having an impact on those I'm serving as well. So
I love what you said there, because that's the that's the part I think sometimes we can be inclined to skip over, is we have to first give our medicine to ourselves.
oh yeah,
And we have to. And we can be inclined, again, particularly in this modern culture where we're so kind of like produce, this only has value if it's making money. We can be very quick to move into like, how is this medicine for others? What does this look like when I put it out there? And forget that only comes from being our medicine for ourselves, first of all.
yeah.
And what I love is the way that you've really given that time and devotion, despite the challenges, despite, sometimes pauses, stop, start, resistance. You've really given time for that medicine, your own medicine, to saturate into your own being. And
Mm,
then recognizing that, oh, this is medicine for others.
yeah,
Me showing up and speaking
yeah.
my truth, being my truth, is this invitation, this model for others, and particularly the women in your circles, to do the same.
Mm,
And but that could only make sense from you giving that to yourself first and foremost. So I absolutely love that. So what I'd like to do now is like join the dots a little bit between the two stories, and perhaps start with, if you're willing to share, when that you started to sort of consciously begin the work, consciously step into the path, was when you joined us back, how many, 8, 9, 10 years ago. Would you give a little snapshot of kind of like where you were there, where, what was going on for you in your life?
Sure. Um, yeah, so I had been in my I'd moved to Jersey. I'd been in my relationship with my partner, and he has children. And I moved over to Jersey. I managed to get a job working as a dental hygienist, as I was for many, many years. And yeah, it was an adjustment for both of us. And I was being called I was being called upon in a way that I had never experienced before in my life. And of course, being someone who would always make myself less than and please everyone else, I sacrificed myself in order to make sure that everyone else was okay, because I wasn't able to do both. And so, anyway, it got to, I was extremely I'd lost all sense of self. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing with my life. I didn't know how to. I felt like I was just I can't even describe it really. I didn't have any self purpose. I didn't have any. I didn't know what I was doing here. I don't know what I was here for. I just felt like there was something missing and I didn't know what I was here for. I felt so, I had no self-worth or self-esteem at all by this stage. And I was so stressed and anxious that I was suffering a huge amount of chronic pain, back pain, neck pain. I had to give up my job and my financial independence as a consequence, which just added layer upon layer of more lack of self-worth. It was a really difficult time, and I felt really alone. I wasn't understood by the people that were important to me. Understandably so, we all have our own experiences, so they will have had their own experience of that. But I felt totally isolated, and so I'd had some counselling, and it hadn't really worked, and talking therapies, but nothing seemed to. I never felt seen. I never felt seen until one day we were living in temporary accommodation while we were having the house done up, and I Googled whatever I put into Google search. I can't remember what it was. That changed my life. I stumbled across a Happy School, the little course that you guys were running, and made a connection with Jonathan in the process. And yeah, the rest is history. That's how I ended up in one-to-one coaching with Jonathan, and then the subsequent crucibles thereafter. And yeah, life-changing moment.
I really wish we could go back in time and know what you Googled. It's so funny
Yes.
how my parts of my story start with like something so mundane as Googling something, and yet there were this just like the magical breadcrumb that led to my whole path. But yeah, who knows? Who knows what that magical breadcrumb was that you put into the Google search bar?
Yeah.
I particularly love your story because it actually brings to mind something. I was talking to one of our current mythical ones, which is one of our one-to-one crucibles. I was talking to one of them earlier, talking about the way that we, in this modern culture particularly, look at these manifestations of much deeper wounds and think they are the thing to heal. Whether that be, in my own experience, that was panic attacks, chronic facial pain, this kind of underlying sort of sense of anxiety. And I thought that was the thing I was meant to be healing. That's the problem. If only I can heal that. But of course, that was only quite a surface level, not even a particularly deep, but surface level manifestation of an underlying, what you might call spiritual wound. This was something that could only ever be truly healed from an understanding of this is something for me to become intimate with and alchemize and ultimately find myself within. And it's only from that place can this ever be healed.
Yes.
And so your story is such a great example of that, where all the time we're looking at kind of like, how do I fix this? Again, on a physical level, how do I fix this particular pain? Completely understandable, completely like, who wouldn't want to do that? And especially in a landscape where no one's talking about the deeper emotional, spiritual causes of these things. And yet there was something within you that was like, I'm not being heard. I'm not being seen. There must be something more, which then took you onto the path where you discovered what that was. There's just something, again, that we're here, and if we're here to heal, we're here to become whole. And if we can just listen to those nudges from soul, we will go on the path that will take us there. We will be moved towards healing. That's what I've just seen over and over again. Like the wisdom is so perfect. It's like we don't have to force this. If we can just follow the nudges, it will take us where we need to go.
100%. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more with that. I felt like the whole of my journey has almost, it's happened for me. I haven't had to do anything in a way. Obviously, I've had to do a lot of work and have had to devote to it. But it was, to me, there was no choice. I didn't have any choice.
Well,
There
this
were,
brings us to a brilliant point, which I know you in particular are very well placed to talk to. And I think, as we were talking about before we hit record, there is so much in your journey and how you've journeyed with it that I think is going to be really reassuring and inspiring to people listening, which is, it's one thing finding our path. It's one thing starting to hear those nudges of like, oh, this now, this now. It's quite another to act on that in the face of all of the fear and the resistance that shows up. And so I would love to know, Kate, I've had a, bird's eye view of that as we've been journeying with that over the years, but I'd love for you to share some of how that's shown up for you, how you've experienced this sense of being called into something and felt like, no, I'm not ready, and all the different ways that that's shown up for you.
yeah. It's I think one of the things that I realized once I started doing this was like I started to actually show up was I had been avoiding it. Understand? It's given the wounding, it makes perfect sense. But I had been avoiding showing up at all costs. I would rather dive really deep into the most dark and grim places on my emotional journey or my spiritual journey than actually show up. Like that was so much easier. And even though it was excruciating and desperate at times, and times where I just, I felt completely, totally like stuck with nowhere to go. And then every now and again, I'd find a little chink where I could squeeze through without actually having to show up. And then eventually, I realised that I remember realising there's nowhere else to go now. You have to show up. You have to start. That's the next step. There is nowhere else to go. And yeah, so I'd attempted, I think, to start showing up before that happened a number of times, but obviously just didn't feel ready, or just thought there must be another way out of this, until eventually I did take the plunge with the support of Sarah, and started to hold these monthly women's circles, in-person women's circles. And it was absolutely terrifying. But I knew there was no option. It was that or, what then? There was nowhere else to go. So fortunately that was the case, because if there had been a way out, I would have taken it. But oh my goodness, like the experience of even that first circle blew my mind. It was just so nourishing to my soul. I can't express. I have such a gorgeous group of women that feel, in this really safe, warm, nourishing space where everyone feels safe to sort of open. And the fact that these women are opening and sharing so honestly and vulnerable, it just I was like, oh my God, this is why I'm here. This is what it's for. This is why I've been doing all of this. And so yeah, and so I've been running these in-person circles monthly for the last 7 months, and I keep waiting for one to flop, and it never does. They're always, and why would it? Because the women in it are so gorgeous. Yeah, anyone called to come to a circle like that brings magic with them. And yeah, it's just changed everything. It's made me realize how valuable a space to be able to show up as all of who you are, and know that you're going to be held in that is yeah, so it's just so nourishing. And so going back to the actual question, which was, remind me.
Well, I'm actually going to jump in here because it's really interesting that you answered the answer you gave is like so like it was almost like a step on from where I was expecting you
Right.
to answer it, which is
I
so
kind of,
interesting. But it's perfect in the I was like, gosh, this is so testament to wherever we are. It's so easy to forget where we've been, like where the challenge
yeah,
was when it was. And also, it was funny because I was expecting you to answer from a place of the years between those 2 points, as in,
right.
like when you first stepped foot, kind of like consciously doing the work to, as you say, quite recently, serving your medicine. There's quite a good few years in between where again there was lots of resistance that showed up on the way along that path. And
Mm,
then I was like, oh, cool, of course she's answering from there, because that's what we all do, isn't it? We answer from like the place, the material for liberation we've most recently been
yeah,
in. So it
yeah.
makes perfect sense that you've done that. And so there's a couple of things that occurred to me. One is that we so often will dismiss all of the road that we've just traveled, that was,
Mm.
like gauntlet after gauntlet, that felt like it was life or death, and then we're past it, we're like, yeah, done that.
There's just so much when you're at the beginning.
That was no thing. And I just love that. It's like, I was expecting you to talk about all the times where, like, even speaking in a circle in one of our crucibles was
Oh,
excruciating.
right,
And
yeah.
I was just like, oh, it's so funny that that's just not present right now. So I would like to go back to that. But again, there's just something so perfect in the fact that that just wasn't even in your awareness in
Oh,
answer
that's
to the
so funny. I
question.
had a sense that I wasn't answering the question. As time went on, I had a sense I wasn't answering the question, but I
No,
hadn't
no,
even
it's
realised why.
absolutely perfect. It's kind of
Yeah.
uncovered something that just wouldn't have been so
Mm,
beautifully uncovered otherwise. But there's also something else that you were expressing that I think is really helpful to notice. That is, there is a point at which serve, as you know, over and over again, I've said things like, as far as I can see, the worker being our medicine is actually the portal to some of the deepest spiritual work we can do.
mhm,
um I really see that, particularly for old souls, particularly for
mhm.
old souls that came here to serve others in some way, as a healer, guide, teacher, a role like that, it likely will be the place, like certainly, if not the most potent portal, will certainly be up there as like one of the top one or two to us truly being who we come here to be and
Mm,
doing the deepest spiritual work in order to become that. And where I was really seeing that in your story was there is a point where we can be, in the deepest work, but unless we kind of step over that precipice, unless we hurl ourselves into the abyss, as
mm,
in the words of one of my favorite quotes
mm.
from Terence McKenna, there is a point at which we have to be in the serving of our medicine to alchemize what's still there for us to alchemize. Some
Yeah.
wounds we will only even make contact with, or some like depths of wound would only make contact with in that work of serving our medicine. It's like what brings us present to what's still there, which you
Mhm.
spoke to so beautifully. It's like the only way forward was for you to start serving your medicine, and you couldn't move further on your path without serving your medicine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that I think is just so perfectly spoken about. But I would like to rewind back a little bit,
Mm,
because, as you know, the work itself, being in circle, speaking in circle, worrying what you're going to say is the wrong thing,
yeah.
being in ritual practices, all of that was really
Yeah.
challenging for
Yeah.
you as well. And I'd love for you to just touch a bit on like what was showing up for you then. Why was that challenging for you? And I think you've already sort of said it, but there was something that kept bringing you back anyway. So I'd love to hear a bit
Mm.
about your sense of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting when you were naming all those things that I can the feeling. Um, well, it's an anxious feeling. So all, yeah, I mean, I remember the Waking the Wild Feminine was the first crucible that I was in with you guys. It's just actually making me emotional thinking about it now, and it's funny. I've told it before to the women who come to my circle. Um, I mean, every week I dreaded it. Every week I just cried constantly throughout the experience. Every week I said, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. We were working with the women who run with the wolves. It didn't make any sense to me. Nothing landed. And it was just awful. I mean, it wasn't.
Thanks, Kate. My work's been described as many things, but it was awful. Testimonial by Kate Motley.
Oh, but it was. Oh, but I kept coming back. There was obviously something that kept, and the other women in it were just so lovely. And there was, I was connecting to a part of myself that I hadn't been in touch with from forever. And so anyway, that's where it began. And I think all the crucibles after that, there was medicine, which I did twice actually, and I can't remember whether there was another one I was in, and I obviously had this interspersed with one-to-one coaching, on and off. But every time I showed up in circle, the anxiety, I'd sit there feeling just, why am I even here? Who am I to be here? There's all these just huge personalities, huge, magnificent, magical beings I'm surrounded by, and then there's me. Like, why am I even here? Why do they even want me here? There was so much of that, even though I knew that wouldn't be what anyone was thinking, but that's how I felt. I just thought, that they're doing me a favour. They just feel sorry for me. That's what I thought. And so I felt anxious every single time, and sharing, I always would go into this kind of that kind of trying to speak quickly, and what I'm sharing is probably not really relevant, so I just will get through it. It always felt helpful to share. I always felt good that I'd shared, but the anxiety that came with that, and the feelings of like, I'm probably saying something I shouldn't, or there's probably something far better that I could be saying, or what's anyone else going to learn from this anyway? And I'd judge the way I'd look, and just judge my demeanour, and start saying, why don't I make more of an effort? I mean, the narrative that would go on in my head was ridiculous. I mean, it wasn't ridiculous. It was perfectly understandable. Painful. And even in circles where we weren't sharing anything directly, I felt this anxiety, and but yet the power of them was just, that's why I joined them, because I knew there was something in them that was, if I'm surrounding myself by these people, something good's got to come of it.
Oh, bless you. There's just so much. I was listening to you just then, just thinking, oh my goodness, is now so obvious in hindsight how perfectly placed you are to run circles. You've experienced the absolute, intensity of all the things that could show up for a woman or anyone, it being in a circle of this kind, and what's going to come up for them. And who better to hold others through that? Just the perfection of this is just beyond, often we'll see these like beautiful symbols and synchronicities that weave through people's journey, and then what ultimately how they're here to serve their medicine. But they always delight me. But yours is particularly perfect, and it's like, who better to lead a women's circle than someone who's experienced them the way that you have? I love that so much. And there was something else in what you were saying there that felt like something really important for us to touch on. So you there's two things actually. The first is you mentioned something along the lines of you felt all this sense of like, shame and why am I even here? And, the rest of them must be thinking, like, oh, for goodness sake, why is she even here? And then you said, but like I knew on one level they weren't thinking that. And that's such a great example of how we can have these, like, think logically. Of course, that's not what's really going on, but nothing will replace the power of when we're still in the grips, especially unconsciously, of the old story. That will always trump whatever else we tell
Yeah.
ourselves.
Mm.
So, whether it's us trying to tell ourselves or someone else trying to tell us, it does
Mm.
not matter because we are living out that old story until we're ready to stop,
Yeah.
until we're ready to make it conscious, until we're ready to alchemize it. And so that's just a perfect example, and why so many of our attempts, again, well-meaning attempts to sort of change the content of our thinking, doesn't work, because it's
No.
all happening over the top of this unalchemized wound that is telling us the story, and
Mm.
it's telling us in this very visceral way. It's in our blood and
Mm.
bones.
Mm.
And so I think that's a really important thing to recognize. The other thing was, uh, you did this like self-correction early. You said something like, how I was feeling was ridiculous. And then I noticed you did this like very quick correct. And you said, no, not ridiculous. It was really painful.
Mm.
And when someone is able to do that, that's one of those moments where I have this sense of like, thank goodness, like
Mm.
that little girl is getting to be seen, which, as
Yeah.
you know, is really the heart of the work. That is the place
Mm.
that all of this needs to happen from, us
Yeah.
finally seeing that little boy or girl that's at the heart of this,
Mm.
and how they're feeling and what they need, and the absolute love and acceptance they need for any of this to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Oh,
And I could
yes.
see that, like, micro, like, it might not seem like a big thing on the outside, just hearing you change the word from ridiculous to painful, but I know what was
Mm.
going on in you that made that like, oh, of course, that's not actually true at all.
Mm.
What's true is it was deeply painful, because you, I know now, have made contact with that little girl, and you know why she was feeling the way she felt. So I'd love to
Mm.
hear your sense. I feels like we're kind of moving into a close, and like it feels like the most perfect way to kind of move into a close is to hear your sense of that.
Mm. Oh, yes. This has landed for me so deeply in the last few weeks, actually. Re- really. It's 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 everything. Um, because if we don't love ourselves in that thinking, then we're making it wrong. And as long as we're making something we're doing wrong, how can we ever heal from it? Like it just, like I really, and sometimes I sometimes still to this day sort of say, well, how do I bring myself? How do I do that? I can't even describe how I do that. I can't really even, but I think when I used to do it, it was a much more, um, I'd acknowledge it. I'd acknowledge that
Mm.
there was something, that this was an experience that's valid and that's okay. Whereas now, and obviously that was enough to help me
Mm.
heal,
It
but
sort of opens the door, doesn't it?
yes,
Something that needs us to like start that relationship, start that conversation.
yes.
Mm.
Whereas now it's just, yeah, I've got to the point where I just, it's in those moments where I'm grasping to escape something. I'm in a feeling and an experience that I am desperate to escape. And I shared something online actually about that in the moment, and this was really powerful actually because I couldn't see a way out of this particular experience, and I felt so stuck. And I wrote a post in the moment about how stuck I was feeling, and in the process of writing this post, it was like, oh my God, no, this is this is exactly what I'm supposed to be experiencing right now, and this is okay. And this is okay. I'm allowed this feeling. I'm allowed to feel stuck. It's okay. I just need to love myself in this experience. It was so powerful, and I think that moment really illuminated to me the power and well, it's essential, the love of our inner child, as this, yeah, it's a child that needs tending. It was just profound. So yeah. When I do say something like that was ridiculous, I do actually think afterwards, how dare I say that? It's nothing's ridiculous. So yeah, no, that it's everything. Loving that inner child is everything. I totally feel that through and through. It's everything.
Oh, it's everything to me. Again, it's like there's certain things that our students will say that like has me know. Oh, that's where they are, and then my heart is just bursting to know that. And that's one of those when I can feel they have that relationship. They see their inner child just like we would a flesh and blood
Mhm,
child, and
mhm.
just like you'd hope, most of us wouldn't be saying how a child feels if they're scared or feeling, in pain. We wouldn't say that was ridiculous. We start to recognize, like, why on earth would I do that to little
Yeah,
me?
yeah, yeah.
Just so profound.
Mm,
And I love also that you said, this didn't feel natural. It didn't feel easy initially. For
no.
some people it is. It's like almost this kind of like, oh, I get it now. That's been the missing piece. But for many, it's not. It's a kind
Mhm.
of, I'm just almost going to go through like I'm told it's
Yeah,
okay for me to be feeling like this.
yeah.
It doesn't quite make sense, but I'm going to sort of start with that being like, what if that is true? What if I
Mm,
do kind of allow myself to accept that I feel right now this, and this, and don't make that wrong. And then it starts to take us in that direction slowly but surely.
mm,
Um, as you say, for you, that's been, it's been a slow process, but look
yeah,
at the power of it.
yeah,
Look what that's opened up.
yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
goodness. So this, I just absolutely love everywhere we've been in this conversation, Kate. Where I'd love to finish it is you just naming, and I know you've described them as we've been talking, describe the circles, describe the way you're serving your medicine, but I feel there's something really profound in you just naming, like, this is what I do, this is how I serve my medicine. It feels like such a beautiful kind of like closing chapter, for now at least, of your story. So Kate, how do you serve your medicine?
Mm. Ah, it's a joy every month to create. So I have women come to my house. I'm very blessed that I have a perfect environment, lovely lounge to hold women's circles, and I take some time to really create a kind of otherworldly space. And we have food, and we have a centerpiece, and a candle. There's lots of candles, uh, and music, and yeah, I just take some time to really try and create an alternative space, an otherworldly space. And when people first come in, we sit down. There's food, there's music playing, but then I will usually bring a specific song to circle, and this is the point at which we will start to drop in to our bodies and drop out of our heads, and we'll sit in silence and listen to the song. And that moment, I've had people feedback to me that that's the moment where they can really feel themselves go, oh, you know, letting go of that kind of outside world. And then yeah, I'll obviously welcome everyone, and there's usually a theme to the circle which I might bring, and then we'll have an opening round where people will just introduce themselves if they've not been before, and bring an intention for the circle, and maybe a sacred object, which they can speak about, just to sort of start to use their voice. And then we go into a meditation, and that is that's my favourite part, actually, the meditation. And so once the meditation, we're all feeling really grounded and connected. I then open the circle to sharing, which can either be around the theme or whatever's alive for someone in that moment. And it's just beautiful. And sometimes there's silences. We welcome the silences. In fact, I love the silences, which is something that has gone against my whole experience in life. I'd be the first person to fill a silence. But they're just magical. And the connection felt in that space is it just fills me up every single time. And the women seem to really, we all feel it, and it's just magical. It is magical. It's a magical space.
I can't even tell you how good it feels for you to hear you claiming that you are creating this magical space. There was so much in, and I know the alumni and current students fellow students in uni have journeyed with you over years will just know there's so much in the way that you describe that, where these little parts you said, like creating this otherworldly space and all the different ways, creating the centerpiece. All of this I know would have been impossible for you not that long ago.
No. Mm-hmm.
And this is like it's not just I'm just running women's circles, even like the details, how you're creating that, why you're creating these certain things a certain way, speak volumes of where you are in terms of like that just fully being your medicine and how that's unfolding. Just such a delight to witness. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
So Kate, I love the fact that I'm saying this to you. Where can women find out more about you and your circles?
I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but the best place to probably find out about the circles is on my website, which is katemotley.podia.com, and the links to my Facebook and Instagram are on there as well. I mainly share in Facebook, really. But yes, and also there's a link to the online circles, which I'll be running in a bit later in the year. I'm not sure when exactly yet, but that link is also on the website.
Perfect. Wonderful. I am celebrating you so deeply, Kate. This has been a gorgeous conversation, but there's just something so symbolic in you having journeyed all the way you've journeyed to actually be here on the podcast speaking about it in your own authentic voice. Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. It has been amazing. It has been. Who would have thought it?
Well, I said that's Jonathan, and he said I would have done, and he would have done. So he's right. Thank you so much, darling.
Thank you.
I very much hope you enjoyed watching that. And if you did and you're not already subscribed, then do hit that bell thingy and subscribe to automatically get each fresh new episode as it's released each week. If you'd like to find out more about the work we do at Be Mythical to guide and support old souls in this new world to live their own unique myth, do hop along to bemythical.com and you'll find out all the ways you can join us and go deeper with us on your own mythical journey. Lots of love for now. Mwah. See you again next week.